is this. Well, let's talk a little bit about today's agenda. Today's agenda is going to be main motion, incidental motions, subsidiary motions, privileged motion. Alright, again I can see boring, 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 boring. Okay, so let's put the real slide up today. Alright, boring stuff today. Main motions, incidental motions, privileged motions, subsidiary motions. We haven't got them in order. Boring, boring, boring. Woo. Okay, so what we're going to do, let's play. Let's play. Alright, we have people. We're going to try to get things situated up here. We're going to have a couple of people come up here. All right, we have WD. And we have Earl. Earl? Yeah, Earl's right there. Earl. And we have Eileen. Eileen's going to be our moderator. Okay, make sure I got my notes right here too. Oh my God.
We just got out.
Okay, Eileen. Okay, we're gonna have a role play. Eileen is leading the meeting. Go ahead, Eileen.
Any new business?
I think it would be a good idea to send Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Cincinnati in August.
I do too.
Come on up here. I'm sorry, we can. Oh, you go back. You're not up here this time. I knew Earl wanted your job. But anyway, all right, Earl. Okay, sorry about that. Larry, go ahead.
Let's just stop. Oh, wait a minute. You two are out of order.
Okay, let's stop here just for a second. All right, this is a formal business meeting of an assembly, and we just can't bring up topics and talk about them just as we want. In a formal meeting, someone must make a motion, and we must second the motion for the matter to be brought to the entire assembly. Making someone second a motion avoids wasting the time of the entire assembly about a matter that only one person cares about. There's always one of those. A formal meeting differs from a working session. The informal give and take of a working session is not really appropriate for a formal business meeting, but it can be held in a working session. Of course, the assembly has the power, if they decide, to suspend the rules and go into a working session, do their business and try to do the give and take and try to figure out the problem, and then come back in a formal session and take the appropriate action if they want to. So another comment here. You notice how Eileen, she got kind of irate and said, "You are out of order." Well, you shouldn't make it that personal. But what Eileen should have said there is, your comments are out of order or your actions are out of order. Not you are out of order. Eileen, go ahead.
I have a question. Are we allowed to ask questions?
Sure.
Can you submit your own motion?
Hmm?
Can you submit your own motion?
Chairperson, pre-sign it?
Well, anybody. I mean, if I had something I wanted to discuss, not as a chair, but just like a seven, can I say, I need to make a motion for something I'm interested in?
As long as you're recognized by the chair.
I am willing to entertain a motion if you would like to discuss this topic.
I make a motion that we send Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in August.
Okay, stop again. We hear this quite often in business meetings. Say, I make a motion. Technically, the verbiage should be, I move that. We send Steve Lanham, etc. Go ahead.
I second the motion.
Okay. As you notice here, the person seconding the motion does not need to be recognized by the chair. You can just go ahead and do that. Go ahead, Eileen.
Really? But it does need to give us names so the secretary can keep track of who's
In formal
seconded.
business meetings,
Right.
well, you'll notice that, state your name, state your club number, et cetera, for the secretary. In a small session like this, it's really not necessary, but you raise a very good point. Sometimes they do like for you to recognize, announce who you are when you make a motion and make a second.
But still didn't have to be recognized by the chair.
The second does not have to be recognized by
Right.
the chair.
But those rules are set at the beginning of the meeting normally. We're gonna follow these rules, you need to do this, to make a motion.
Yeah, if you either state that at the beginning, or you say if we're following the Robert's Rules of Order, that's understood.
Okay. Left.
This is Robert's Rules of Order?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I was trying to get to storytelling.
Oh.
Sorry. Thank you.
Tell the story.
I bet those are all good.
This is gonna be a great session though.
Okay,
We're telling
Eileen,
a
go
good
ahead.
story, I don't know what the problem. WD, let me ask you a question. Are you saying that you want to pay the expenses for sending Steve Lanham to the convention?
Yes, that is what I'd like to do.
Then I suggest that you include a maximum dollar amount to that.
Great idea. I'd like to revise my motion to say that we paid the expenses up to $1,000 for sending Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Cincinnati in August.
Larry, are you okay with that change?
Yes, I am, Madam Chair.
Yes, Madam Chair. Okay, let me make a note here. Okay, the chair can, before the motion is put before the assembly and put on the floor, the chair can engage the person making the motion, just to kind of reword it so that it would actually accomplish something. Because a lot of times people make motions that are vague or poorly worded, or really don't accomplish what they would like it to do. So the chair can work with that person before the motion is presented before the assembly. But at this point, there's no need to formally amend the motion. And some assemblies do require that you submit your motion in writing. That way you get the exact wording of the motion when you're stating it back and forth from the chair. Go ahead, Eileen.
I have another question.
Another question, Eileen.
This
Go
is
ahead.
fascinating. All right, so I asked him to clarify. Asked him to clarify. He clarified, put a number, time, box, whatever the change is. Then I need to go to the second
Yes.
to make sure they still believe that they want a second.
Exactly.
If they don't, they have the opportunity to say, no, I withdraw.
Yes,
How would they do
at that point, they can withdraw their second, and someone
then
else
we
can
have to
lead
get
the
another-
second.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded for our club to pay the expenses up to $1,000 for sending Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Cincinnati in August.
Okay, so you notice here that he's stating the motion specifically so that the exact wording comes out to the assembly. And now that it's been placed before the assembly, it belongs to you. It doesn't belong to the maker of the motion anymore. So any changes to the motion now have to be done through formal amendment. Eileen.
WD, you now have the floor. Please state your reason for making this motion.
Steve Lanham is a rising star in District 40 and has his finger on the pulse of our Toastmasters club. We can't afford not to send him to the convention. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Larry, the chair now recognizes you.
Madam Chair, I am not in favor of paying for Steve Lanham's expenses to the convention. I don't think he's an insufferable and know-it-all and would not have representation for our club at the International Convention or elsewhere. I wanted to go on record as opposing this motion.
Wait a minute, Larry. I thought you seconded the motion. Why are you saying those mean, slanderous things about Steve?
Hey, order. WD, your comments are out of order. Oh, I used the comments, not you. Nice. That's good script
You're
writing.
getting better. He's learning.
You must be recognized by the chair before speaking, and besides, you already had your opportunity to speak.
Okay, the point here. First thing is, just because you second a motion doesn't necessarily mean that you support that motion. It just means
Really?
that you think it merits discussion by the whole assembly, or you might want to be like Larry here, who says, I want to go on record as opposing Steve Lanham, because he is an insufferable know-it-all. That's the first thing. So at this point, we also heard Eileen say, WD, you're out of order, and you've already had your opportunity to speak. So the Roberts Rules of Order are about maintaining order. And in doing so, they ensure that the majority speaks, the majority rule holds, but they also protect the rights of minorities. So a skillful chairperson or skillful presiding officer will alternate between pro and con, for and against, and let everyone have the chance to speak. Once you've spoken, you do not have the opportunity or the right to speak until everyone else in the assembly has had their say about what we're talking about. Eileen?
So anyone else want to say something positive about it, Steve? Then we'll go to the negatives. All right, sorry. If there's no more discussion, we will now vote on the motion. We will vote by raising our right hand. Let me restate the motion to you. The motion has been made and seconded to pay the expenses of up to $1,000 to send Bluegrass Division B Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Cincinnati in August. All in favor, please signify by raising. It says raining.
Rain in your right hand.
Take back what I said about the writing. Please signify by raising your right hand. All opposed. Oh wait, raise. Okay. All opposed. Same sign. The motion fails by a count of 8 to 4.
Okay, so a couple things here. Sometimes you go to business meeting and say, everybody vote by the usual sign. Well, who knows what the usual sign is? The chair must specifically state how we're collecting the vote. It could be a voice vote, it could be raising your hand, it could be something called division of the assembly, where everybody that's for it walks to one side of the room and everyone that's against it walks to the other side of the room. You can do that too.
Is there like a precedence, like where in club meetings I've been, it's yay, nay at first, and then if the tone is not there, then you do a hand.
Yeah, and it's up to the discretion of the chair, but if someone wants to appeal that, they can appeal to the chair and have the vote taken.
Have a vote taken.
Or they can say, I request a division of the
Yeah.
assembly. Yes.
At what time do they appeal to the chair about the vote?
Immediately after the vote.
Okay.
Is that like asking for a recount?
You can ask. That would be basically asking. That's very important. Okay, the second thing you notice here is that the chair, the presiding officer, does not get involved in the discussion. The chair must remain an impartial arbiter of the meeting. If the chair wants to be involved in the discussion, has something to contribute, or something that he is compelled to say, or she is compelled to say, then the chair that officer must vacate the chair and ask a pro tem or another, like the next officer down, step up and preside over the rest of the meeting for that particular motion, that matter. One other point here, the chair can vote. Let's say most votes we take are by simple majority, right? If a majority votes for it, it passes. If a majority votes against it, it fails. And a majority is half plus 1. So if you have 20 people, 10 votes will not pass it. You have to have 11 for it to pass it. Okay. So that majority, that's the majority. Let's say the vote is 10 to 10. So it fails because there's not a majority. But the chair can say, well, I would like to vote, and I vote for the motion. And in voting for the motion, he forces that to pass. But let's say there was a vote of 10 to 9 for the motion. And it passes. The chair can say, well, I wish to vote for the motion, and I vote against the motion. And the chair can cause a tie, and thereby the motion does fail. Okay. Let's hear it for our role players today. Okay. We have other role players coming up, so let's go back to the boring stuff. Okay, making a motion. You got to make the 6 steps. Making a motion, second the motion, and then you refine this a little bit. And the chair puts the motion before the assembly. Then you have discussion about the motion, going back and forth, hopefully between pro and con. Everyone gets a chance to speak. So no one gets two chances to speak until the whole assembly has weighed in. Fifth step, after discussion of the motion, and the chair will see if anybody else want to talk, you know, you can tell. Vote on the motion, giving the specific nature of how the vote will be taken, and then at the end, the chair will announce the results of the vote. So that's a main motion. Yes, question?
A time limit on the discussion. You make that, let that be known ahead of time, and then when to stop it,
Have your
or
handouts?
hand it off to the next side.
You have your handouts, there's something on there called limit or extend the limits of the debate.
Number 8.
And that is one of the subsidiary motions, number 8. And you can request that, say, I want to limit each speaker to 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever you so choose. And it requires a 2/3 majority, as you can tell, to pass it. Or you can also say, I make a motion that we discuss this for 20 minutes. Or I make a discussion that we close, make a motion that we move that. I move that we close debate at 7:30. So you can do it one of those 3 ways. Good question.
Does the chair have to recognize someone who wants to be recognized?
Yeah, it's good form. I mean, the chair could say, you know, if someone else is talking, the chair could say,
What was
no,
the
you didn't waste your
question?
time. But the chair is there to make sure that the meeting moves fairly and orderly. So the chair must recognize people that want to speak.
What was the question? I didn't.
He asked, must the chair recognize someone if they request to speak?
Oh.
You know, if they've already spoken, then no. And you know, sometimes people, when they first get involved in meetings, they want to be the first one out of the gate to say, I support this and this is what I do this. But then you'll notice they learn. If they come out and say everything and somebody comes along later and rips their argument to shreds, then they don't get the chance to speak again until everybody else is spoken. Any more questions? Okay, we're going to do a little bit of the motions and all that kind of stuff, but we have playtime. How about that? All right, so now we have, call up here our Earl. I got Earl up here a little bit prematurely earlier, and we need a couple more chairs. Hey, Bill! Bill is the chairman now. So Bill, you'll take the podium. Carol Cormelink. Who's first? Carol at? There you are, Carol. Come on up. Okay. We have Donnie. We'll let you sit there, Donnie.
All right.
And we have Brenda. Brenda. Okay, you can stay right there, Brenda. Okay. As you know, we have all the important people in our division in this role play for some reason. So Earl, I'll let you go ahead and start.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we start a Bud Watkins Scholarship Fund for 80 Toastmasters in District 40.
Well, first I have to say, I really would rather be home watching the Reds game right now. My wife is Skyping a picture of our 5-year-old kicking the soccer ball. To get back to your question, okay, we have a motion on the first floor to start a scholarship. We have a motion on the floor to start a scholarship fund. Do I hear a second?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to raise a point of information.
Okay, Carol, let's hear it.
Toastmasters Protocol 8.2, Section 2, Part G states this. Funds may not be raised for social events or for other charitable causes, for setting up a fund such as a scholarship or educational fund, nor to support a campaign for a candidate at any level inside or outside the organization.
Okay, you'll see here she raised a point of information. You can also raise a point of order. Point of information is an incidental motion, means it comes up whenever you feel like you need to say it, and it needs to be dealt with immediately. That's what you do with an incidental motion. Carol could have interrupted the speaker, even if Earl had been going on with a long tribute to Bud Watkins. And Carol's interruption would have been in order, because according to the Robert's Rules of Order, you see here we have a column called can it interrupt the speaker? In a point of order, yes, you can interrupt the speaker. But as you can tell, this does not require a second, and a point of order basically is there to shed light, or maybe not a point of information, not a point of order. Point of information is there to shed light on the topic at hand. If you have a question, you can have I want to ask a question about this too. So a point of information does not require a second, it's not debatable, and it's not amendable. And it's generally handled immediately. Go ahead, Earl.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we send Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Cincinnati in August.
I second the motion.
Let me ask you a question, Earl. Do you want to mention a specific dollar amount or the particular type of expenses you have in mind?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm comfortable with the motion as stated.
Okay, so you notice here that the person making the motion does not have to accept the recommendation of the chair. And this is what happened right now. Deal?
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to send Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Cincinnati in August. Any discussion? Yes, Brenda Gaines.
I move that we postpone the discussion of this motion until our next regularly scheduled meeting so we can get some additional information about the cost of the convention.
Okay, so you notice on your handouts here that there is a motion, number 9, to postpone to a certain time, or postpone definitely. As you can tell, it says in that second column, this is a subsidiary motion. So it is in order if there's only a main motion on the floor. So this motion must be dealt with at this point. Go ahead.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to postpone discussion of the main motion to send Steve Lanham to the International Convention in August until our next regularly scheduled meeting so we can get additional information about the cost of the convention. Any discussion?
I move to amend the motion to add the wording that we pay the registration fee only.
I'm sorry, Carol, that motion is out of order.
Look at your chart of motions here. Carol, golly. All right, so you notice that number 9, we have postponed to a certain time. And down in number 11, you have amend. So postpone to a certain time is a higher precedence than to amend. So you cannot bring up a motion to amend because there's a higher precedent motion on the floor. So this is where the order of Robert's Rules and Orders start to make a difference. Like I said, the amend motion cannot be made at this point. So according to Robert's Rules of Order, business must be conducted in a certain order to ensure that the meetings are run smoothly and fairly. This attention to the rules may seem kind of whimsical or capricious in a small meeting where we're dealing with short, simple matters. But in large meetings with complex issues, this Robert's Rules of Order is very, very important. So, the motion to amend is out of order, and a motion to postpone is before the assembly. That's the order we're talking about. Go ahead.
We have a motion on the floor to postpone the discussion of the main motion to the next meeting, just so everyone knows what's going on. I will now restate the main motion. The motion is to send Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Cincinnati in August. We will now vote on the motion to postpone the motion about Steve Lanham to the next meeting. All in favor, raise your right hands. All opposed, same sign. The motion fails. We are now back to discussing the main motion about sending Steve Lanham to the convention. Yes, the chair recognizes Carol Cormally.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we amend the motion to state that we will pay the registration fee only for sending Mr. Lanham to the convention.
Thank you, Carol Cormally. That motion is now in order. Do we have a second?
Okay, so you notice here that the motion of higher precedence, the motion to postpone, has been taken care of and disposed of. So now the motion to amend is in order because all we have on the floor is the main motion, and it's the lowest level. Go ahead.
I second the motion.
We have a main motion on the floor to send Bluegrass Division E Governor to the International Convention in Cincinnati in August. We have an amendment to that motion. The amendment is to add the wording, "and pay for the registration fee only." Any discussion on the amendment to the motion? Let me stress here that we are voting on the amendment and not the motion. Yes, Donnie?
Mr. Chairman, I move to amend the amendment by adding the following words to the motion, and to pay for up to $500 in expenses upon submission of documented receipts for those expenses.
I second the motion.
Wait a minute, the red spatter is up right now. We have a main motion on the floor to send Bluegrass Division E Governor to the International Convention in Cincinnati in August, and we have an amendment to add the wording, "in pay for the registration fee only." Now we have an amendment to the amendment, to add the wording, "in to pay for up to $500 in expenses upon submission of documented receipts for those expenses" to the amendment.
Okay, so now you can see, maybe it's a good idea for the chair to work with the person making the amendment, making the motion in the first place.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of specifics here. Now we have an amendment on top of an amendment. Now it gets kind of complicated. But this is where a good presiding officer and a good parliamentarian, if the presiding officer has someone at hand, that's where they start making their money. Because all this gets really confusing. But you notice the precision that the chairperson, much to her credit, this precision she had taken to state the motions and the amendments, and the primary amendment and the secondary. Go ahead.
Any discussion on the secondary amendment to add the wording, "in to pay for up to $500 in expenses upon submission of documented receipts for those expenses"? Yes, Carol Corley.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we make an amendment by changing "for those expenses" to "for expenses related to lodging, travel, and food."
I'm sorry, Carol, but that motion is out of order. You're not allowed to offer an amendment at this time.
Okay.
Wow.
So you notice we have a primary amendment, and a secondary amendment. Amendments can only go 2 levels deep. Okay? So you can't have 3 amendments, 3rd amendment, 4th amendment. So the assembly must handle these, deal with these in a, what we call a FIFO manner. First, no, right? LIFO manner. Last in, first out. Okay? And so they must vote on the secondary amendment, take care of it, pass it or fail it. Then, after that's done, they can add more secondary amendments, another secondary amendment, back and forth, back and forth. But then after all the secondary amendments, they have to take care of the primary amendment, vote on it, pass it or fail it, and then you come back down to the main motion, and then you have to vote on it. And the main motion, after the secondary amendments and primary amendments are made, that main motion may look a lot different by the time we get to voting. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, now, any more discussion? Seeing none, we will now vote. We are voting on the secondary amendment to add this wording, "and to pay for up to $500 in expenses upon submission of documented receipts for those expenses" to the amendment. Just to be clear here, we are not voting on the primary amendment to pay Mr. Lanham's registration fee, nor are we voting on sending Mr. Lanham to the conference. So all in favor of adding the wording, "in to pay for up to $500 in expenses upon submission of documented receipts for those expenses" to the amendment, please raise your right hands. All opposed, same sign. The motion passes.
Okay. So you notice there's a maze of motions here. It's very complicated. What are we voting on? You know, that's where a good presiding officer and a good parliamentarian can really do it. Like I said, it seems silly for small gatherings and simple issues, but it's critical for large deliberative bodies dealing with complex issues. Yeah.
So is it now open for a second amendment?
Okay, after this has been voted on, another secondary amendment can be brought up. Go ahead.
Now we are ready to discuss the primary amendment, which has just been amended. The primary amendment, as amended, is to add the wording, "to pay the registration fee for Steve Lanham to attend the International Convention plus expenses up to $500 upon submission of documented receipts for those expenses." Yes, Carol Cormelin.
Okay, well, I'm not gonna let Carol speak anymore because she's had plenty of time. And we're running out of time here anyway. But what I want to say is that, like you mentioned, once we take care of that secondary amendment, we could add another secondary amendment. And she wanted to talk about the food, lodging, and travel. So she could do that and add it on at this time, get it voted on. But you notice that the primary amendment now also contains the wording of the secondary amendment because the primary amendment has been amended. So now we're going to vote for the primary amendment.
Now we are ready to vote on the primary amendment to the motion. The main motion is to send Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Cincinnati in August. The amendment is to add the wording, "in to pay the registration fee and expenses up to $500 upon submission of documented receipts for those expenses."
All right. I know it's very painful, right? It's very painful. But in you have an issue that involves millions and billions of dollars, then it's very necessary to maintain order and to conduct business properly. The key here is to make sure that everyone knows exactly what you're voting for and what the exact wording of the motion is. Secondary amendment, the primary amendment, and the main motion. That's the real challenge here for presiding officer in parliamentarian. Okay, go ahead, Bill.
Let me be clear here. We are voting on the amendment and not the main motion. Let's vote. All in favor, raise your hands. All opposed, raise your hands. The primary amendment passes. Now we are ready to discuss the main motion. We're going to send a lesson to the Cincinnati Reds to start a club in the dugout. The motion as amended is to send Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in August in Cincinnati and pay the registration fee and expenses up to $500 upon submission of the documented receipts for those expenses. Any discussion? Seeing none, we will now vote. All in favor, raise your hands. All opposed, raise your hands. The motion fails. We will now move on to the next item on the agenda.
Okay, so we have to go through all that to not send me to the convention. Okay. All right, let's review just for a second. Okay, this more boring stuff, the point of information we talked about, postpone definitely, and amend the motion and go to primary and secondary amendment. Next. Okay. We've had questions throughout. Any final questions? I mean, there are 23 motions on your sheet there. Go ahead.
If you had all these secondary amendments attached to the main motion, I thought hinted at there could be a way to unwrap all that quickly. Could the main motion just be rescinded, and that would sort of dissolve all the other questions or amendments?
Well, I mean, the maker of the motion, well, you can only rescind the motion after the motion has been passed.
Okay, let's say whatever the proper term is for...
You can withdraw a motion.
Withdraw a motion?
Yeah. But once the motion, and that gets kind of in gray territory because the motion becomes the property of the assembly, then if the person making the motion wants to withdraw it, then it's kind of a gray area. It belongs to the assembly at that point. I mean, someone can say, I call for the question, and I want to go ahead and vote right now, or I want to limit the discussion. Or someone can say, I make a motion, we postpone this indefinitely. And when you postpone indefinitely, that's another subsidiary motion. That means you're just voting to never vote on it at all. So you just send it into never.
Well, Bill's outside. You want to tell him that we voted for him to start the Cincinnati Reds?
Yeah. Okay. So like I said, I mean, there's 23 of these, and you can get to make these as complicated as you want. So, next slide. So any more points of information? Okay. Anybody want to tell me anything?
I move to adjourn.
Okay. That was the highest motion, not debatable. Doesn't require a second.
You voted on me?
We just voted to send you to the Cincinnati Reds to start a Toastmaster club.
To the Reds themselves? No problem. I got the Linders in my back pocket. It's all good.
So we have motions to amend, objection to the consideration of this. Let's go home.
Yeah.